So I actually saw this one last week, and I've been kind of dreading this conversation because this is one of those films. It's directed by one of the Farrelly brothers, Peter Farrelly. His brother, unfortunately, was dealing with a family tragedy and just was unable/unwilling to sort of be working at the moment. So Peter did this one on his own. And this is a very different film than the Farrellys have done in the past. They're very well known for, big comedies, probably most famously Dumb and Dumber. The most recent films haven't quite been a huge success. So it is interesting to see Peter Farrelly going off of a screenplay that, first of all, was written by the son of one of the main characters, Nick Vallelonga, who is an Italian-American, whose father, Tony Vallelonga, also known as Tony the Lip, was at one point a driver/bodyguard for a classical pianist named Don Shirley. You've probably heard of some of Don Shirley's work. Very, very talented performer who went on a tour of the Deep South in the 1960s. Don Shirley was African-American, so that is where the name of the movie comes in. The name of the movie is Green Book. And I did not know this going into the film, but there were these things called Green Books, where someone in Harlem actually decided that he was going to, he started doing this in the 50s, started to make like a list of restaurants and motels and people's houses that African Americans could frequent when they were traveling while black, was the idea. Because whether you were in the South or the North, this thing went all the way to Alaska. These Green Books, they were widely published, and they were kind of they were a lifesaver. They were a tool for moving about this country for African Americans that really prevented them from getting into some serious trouble, in many cases protecting their lives. One of the issues with this film, I would say, actually, is that it creates a kind of a dishonest distinction between the Deep South and the North, because really the differences in 1962, which is when this film takes place, the big differences between the South and the North were, like, both areas were heavily segregated, but in the South, it was legally segregated. This was the era of Jim Crow laws. And there's even a moment in the film where they sort of like sigh relief because they go up into the North, which rang extremely false to me. And as I did more research into this film, I found that a lot of Green Book is historically dishonest in a way that I think seriously detriments it and makes it very difficult for me to even recommend this one. This is one of those feel-good race relations films about two guys who become friends who are very different from each other. Don Shirley is... he's an African-American artist who, he likes the finer things in life, and his frustrations come from the fact that he performs in these grand hotels, but he's not even allowed to use the restroom there, let alone eat in these ballrooms, let alone sleep in these rooms. He has to use this Green Book, although he's never at one point referencing the Green Book. It's always used by Tony's character. And I should say, Tony is played by Viggo Mortensen. I think the last film I remember seeing him in was Captain Fantastic, and he was fantastic in that film. I thought that was a very good movie. And then Mahershala Ali, who is in a bit of a career streak at the moment. He is the only reason I think that someone should seek out this film, because his performance here is absolutely enchanting. He plays a very closed up, kind of world weary, but also, impossibly isolated yet curious character that is so difficult to put your finger on who he is. The problem here is, of course, the writing. As I was looking into this, many of the details brought up about Don Shirley's life in Green Book are not just false, they're egregiously false. He's completely mischaracterized. His family has outspokenly decried this film as making a mockery of who Don Shirley really was. Don Shirley passed away a few years ago, within months of Tony the Lip. And it's very difficult because I think a lot of people are going to watch Green Book and they're going to get sucked into a movie about two guys becoming friends. Tony is an Italian-American who is very racist, but this is a film about a racist man learning to be better and learning to sort of not just treat African Americans better, but to be less of a bad person in general. Tony the Lip is actually an actor. He was one of the characters in Goodfellas. He was in Sopranos, which kind of leads into his son writing the screenplay here. And every moment of this film, you can really feel the fact that this is 100% from Viggo Mortensen's character's perspective. This is really Tony's story, and unfortunately, Don Shirley is sort of just a plot device for him to become a better person. And it just is such a shame, because that is not the kind of film that's relevant to 2018, I think. I think that if this film had come out a couple of decades ago, even a decade ago, because I think a lot of people have rightly referenced this as this year's The Help. It really is that sort of film. Some people have gone as far to say that this is a white savior film. I wouldn't go that far, because it's not even that Tony the Lip is trying to save anyone. There are moments in here where he's educating Don Shirley about African-American culture, because for spoilery reasons, Don Shirley in this film, portrayed as, has never really connected with the black community. Again, this is one of those egregiously false ideas presented by the film. And you would almost forgive somebody for having a good time with Green Book, which is just an unfortunately bad movie that is made pretty well, because it has Mahershala Ali, who also, I believe he produced this film along with Octavia Spencer. I want to say, I hope I'm correct about that. But they signed off on this film, and they look at this film as something that apparently was something that they wanted, that they thought would be useful to audiences. And to me, this is the kind of movie that is useful to people who are deeply racist, who want to watch a movie that makes them feel like things used to be worse. So that means things are good right now. And kind of the message of this movie is that you just, to cure racism, you have to change people's hearts. Now, I am a firm believer in that being complete and utter BS. I think that some hearts will not change on things like racism. I think that in these days, I think that is clearer than ever. The only thing that cures racism is the laws and, systemic racism being stomped out, by politicians and by the people advocating and championing for those rights, and not waiting around for people like Tony the Lip to be slightly less racist. And so I couldn't help but shake that idea through this movie, which is a drama, obviously, but with a lot of funny moments and a lot of like, oh, look at Tony, this racist chap. When is he going to learn? And then not even really scratching the surface of who Don Shirley is. Don Shirley, a much more interesting character, I think, because the performance is just so much more subtle. I mean, Viggo Mortensen, he's a fine actor, but his performance is over the top. It's garish. There's no subtlety to it. There's no nuance. It really is just, he doesn't take any crap from anybody. And he goes throughout this whole movie sort of, he's adaptable to the plot. At one moment, he's fiercely racist. The other, oh, he's fine. He's not a bad dude. And then another, he's like, oh, I'm fine with this thing, which kind of comes out of nowhere, this thing that they discover about Don Shirley. And this is just one of those films that, for me, it was extremely irritating to get through, because there are so many better films being made right now about racism, about, African Americans speaking out about their pain in ways that also empower them as well. And this movie, to me, it just feels like an excuse. It just feels like a way for white audiences to go and feel good about themselves. And instead confronting some really harsh realities. They're confronting, the harsh realities of the 1960s, which, the 1960s, racism wasn't cured out of just the kindness of white people's hearts, Tony the Lip's heart. It was cured because Jim Crow laws went away, because the Voting Rights Act happened, the Civil Rights Act happened. And I want that movie, if you're going to go to the 1960s, where you're actually going to address solutions to deep problems that we have right now. I don't want this sort of cookie cutter, let's show Linda Cardellini sort of being your avatar surrogate of feel good, white liberalism. I don't want that personally. That's my request. But I do recognize that a lot of people are going to come to this movie coming out of it feeling good. And I think that that's unfortunate. I think this is a bad movie with some incredible performances. Mahershala Ali, this is one of his best. It really, that is one of the most frustrating films to watch, because you can't help but feel like what he's doing here is so above the artistic merit of what else is being presented. For me, I'm between a C- and a C. I'm leaning more towards C-, but I'm going to give it a C at the moment. It really is one of those things, like the more I learn about this film and what it betrays, the more I just really tell people, don't bother with it. It's not worth your time.
That's disappointing to hear. I was afraid that was going to be the case for this film.
Yeah, and I guess I'm not alone. I have a review from a friend of the show, Maya Abdul-Baki. She's been on a few times. She's kind of there with me. She gave this one a 5 out of 10, which is about where I'm at as well. In her review, she said, Green Book's perspective is skewed to favor Viggo Mortensen over Mahershala Ali. Also not a fan of this movie, but I know that a lot of people do like it. So I'm not in the majority of critics in this one. It's got like, I think it's Rotten Tomatoes is like in the 80%, something like that.
That was actually higher.
Oh, actually, I have it right here. It's 82% at the moment. Average rating of 7.9 out of 10. So I think a lot of people are giving this one a pass because of Mahershala Ali's performance, and I do think that it's probably going to get some Oscar attention. But it's a tough one. It's a tough one because you want to celebrate a great performance from an actor who's really on the rise here, but yeah, I'm sort of like on the what cost kind of scale. So that's Green Book. And are you still going to check this one out? Will Ashton, I kind of want to talk to you about it. So I would.
Yeah, I mean, I have a feeling it's probably going to get nominated for Best Picture. Not to say that it should, but I'm guessing that it's going to. It just seems like the type of film, like the safe, good-hearted type of film that gets in, even though it's not really the best or the film that's most widely appreciated, just like that kind of safe, middling type of film that sneaks in. But I'll probably see it because of that, but it's not like I'm wildly enthusiastic to see it. It looks exactly what I was afraid it was going to be.
Right. I think it's worth joining the conversation.
Sure. That's the main reason why I wanted to check it out.
Thanks for listening. To hear more Cinemaholics, including this episode, be sure to subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, Spotify, Google Play, and wherever else you love podcasts. See you next time.